I didn't really make that perfectly clear, and I sent a message to Pastor. It says, I'm done, right? He goes, oh, no, you're not done. Okay, we negotiated. Look who won. So I want to do three things this morning. This is a Sunday school lesson. It is Sunday school time. We do need to have a Bible theme, in my opinion. So we're going to talk about something that has nothing to do with finances, but it interests me. So we're going to do that. We're going to discuss insurance. I touched on leasing last time a little bit, but Patty said I did a very superficial job, so I'm going to try to do a better job today. And then if we have time, I'd like to do a little review and some question and answer if you'd like to. Questions will be fine. Answers, you get the best. I can do the best I can. After a quarrel, a husband says to his wife, you know, I was a fool when I married you. She said, yes, dear, but I was in love and I didn't really notice. What did the nose say to the finger? Quit picking on me. I told my carpenter not to carpet my steps. He gave me a blank stare. I saw my wife trip and drop a basket of clothes she had just ironed. I watched it all unfold. My wife once stated, you need to do more chores around the house. I said, can we change the subject? She said, okay, how about this? More chores around the house need to be done by you. Did you know French fries were not actually made in France? They were made in Greece. What is made of leather and sounds like a sneeze? A shoe. Thanks for explaining the word many to me. It means a lot. I told my daughter she drew her eyebrows too high. She looked surprised. All right, so if you would turn to Genesis chapter 5. You like the nose one the best, didn't you? Yeah, I thought you would. So I find it interesting, and there's a lot of things in God's Word we'll never understand, right? And I do like studying these things. I particularly like the Old Testament because, to be honest with you, I don't feel qualified to teach the New Testament. I afraid I might mess it up. But I think if I mess up things in the Old Testament, nobody really knows anyway. It can't really be wrong. It's not going to affect anybody's salvation or anything. So when we get to heaven, God's going to say, Jack, you tried. But I'm going to read some verses in Genesis chapter 5, and it's all about the ages of the first 10 generations of Adam on this earth. So Genesis chapter 5 and verse 3. And Adam lived 130 years and begat a son in his own likeness after his image and called his name Seth. And the days of Adam after he had begotten Seth were 800 years, and he begat sons and daughters. And all the days of Adam lived were 930 years, and he died. Verse 8. And all the days of Seth were 912 years, and he died. Verse 11. And all the days of Enos were 905 years, and he died. Verse 14. And all the days of Canaan were 910 years, and he died. Verse 17. And all the days of, boy, if somebody can pronounce this better than I can, I'm sure, Mahalalel were 895 years, and he died. And all the days of Jared were 962 years, and he died. And all the days of Enoch were only 365 years. And Enoch walked with God, and he was not, for God took him. And all the days of Methuselah were 969 years, and he died. And all the days of Lamech were 777 years, and he died. Oops, I skipped around here a little bit. I'm on now verse 32. And Noah was 500 years old, and Noah begat Shem, Ham, and Japheth. We know that Noah lived to be 950 years. So here's some interesting little tidbits from that. Methuselah lived the longest, 969 years, right? It's interesting to me that none of them lived over 1,000, but they all lived a similar, right around 900. Low 900s, 895 to 969. All of them right in there except for Lamech, 777. Any idea why Lamech only lived 777 years? Again, this is Jack theorizing things, right? Yes.
The flood.
That's He was 5 years short of the flood. And how many years short of the flood was Methuselah? One. He died in the same year of the flood. Interesting, though, that they all lived to be 900 and some years. Lamech only 777 years, but died before the flood. All of the 10 generations before Noah passed away before the flood. Could it be that God didn't want them to die in the flood and didn't want them to carry on after the flood? And that's when they died, and so Lamech only made it 777 years. Then after the flood, lives were significantly shorter. Shem lived 600 years, and the next 3 generations after Shem lived about 400 years. And then 6 generations after that, so that it'd be the 11th generation after Shem, would be Abraham, who lived 175 years. Why did it change? Nobody knows, right? But we have some theories, and I think the theories are very interesting, but they're only just that. It's interesting, and we can speculate, and I think speculation about God's word, keeping in mind that God is perfect, that God is all-knowing, and we want to try to learn what he would like for us to learn, I think we can be fine in our speculation. It could be that Adam, when he was created, was genetically perfect. But what happened to Adam? Sin. He ate of the fruit of the tree of knowledge and good and evil, and what did God say would happen? He will surely die. Could it be that at that point, that's when Adam started to die? His perfect body, although perfect, became less than perfect after he ate that fruit. It's also speculated that earth was in a perfect creation before the flood. Plants were plentiful, and man did not eat any meat. So did the environment that people lived in before the flood change, which caused a shortage in life expectancy? Or did maybe the body change after the flood such that it benefited from eating meat instead of eating plants, but it also changed in such a way that it would not live as long? There is another theory that there's a natural mutation that began after the flood, because up until the flood, everybody's living to be 900 and some years long, right? But there's this flood thing that changes things. Could it be that God introduced a mutation into our bodies that each life after Noah became less and less perfect, and these mutations didn't line up as well as they should? We weren't maybe as perfect as Adam was, even though something caused him to die, whereas before he ate of it, he would not have died. Some of these mutations, as generations go on, they affect people more, and they get to the point where they just don't live as long. 120 years, really nobody ever lives to be that long anymore. Moses lived to be 120 years. Abraham lived to be 175 years. So by the time of Abraham, it had really shortened up quite a little bit. God wanted the earth populated, so he had people live a long time, which probably increased the population a lot faster than we could if there was only just a few of us. That's probably why it did. It's also interesting that lifespans shortened after the Tower of Babel. I don't see any connection why the Tower of Babel, what that effect has, other than maybe making people more separated, cause our bodies to be somehow different, and not allow for the longer life. But the Tower of Babel happened in the days of Peleg, and Peleg and all the generations after them saw their lives basically cut in half. So it was a dramatic switch from post-flood, pre-Tower of Babel to post-Tower of Babel. But just the lives got pretty much cut in half. Why there was, no, I didn't see any good links for that. It's interesting that Shem and the next 3 generations after Shem, that they live longer than anyone from the next 5 generations. So the fifth generation after Shem died before Shem did, because Shem lived so long and the others after them lived so much shorter. Shem actually outlived Terah, and Terah was the father of Abraham. So 11 generations after, 10 generations, I think, after Shem was Abraham, and Abraham lived longer. He died after Abraham's father died. That's how much longer Shem lived, and how quickly lives began to be shorter. The flood occurred about 1,670 years after the creation of man, and the Tower of Babel occurred about 1,820 years after the creation of man. People lived about 900 years before the flood, 400 years after the flood, and less than 200 years after the Tower of Babel. So some other theories come from fossil records. Fossil records reveal that prior to the flood, most of the earth appeared to have a tropical type environment. Following the flood, there's clearly an environmental change. Along with that, again, theorized, along with that environment prior to the flood, there is a water up above in the heavens, which was blocking Earth's ultraviolet rays. Our bodies have DNA, and our bodies have a DNA repair system. What hurts the DNA repair system? Ultraviolet light. One of the theories is that after the flood, you no longer have that protection, and so therefore our bodies don't last long because the DNA doesn't last long. Again, just as Jack's speculation, well then why did Noah still live 950 years without that protection? Some with the protection, some without. And Shem lived 600 years, and then it slowly reduced after that. Maybe not so slowly. That Tower of Babel is another trigger, because all that time you still didn't have. Why didn't it go straight to 120 years right away? You lost the ultraviolet light. Why did it take so long to go down? Could it be another reason? Again, some very, very smart people, much smarter than me, will adamantly say, hey, that water of protection protected us, and that made the difference in our lives. It was also theorized that atmospheric pressure was greater before the flood, allowing better breathing and the body to work more efficiently. It was believed, it's theorized, that Adam could run 100 miles and not be tired. 100 miles. Again, that's a theory, but the body was working better, and we just function a whole lot better. So again, after the flood, things didn't work as well because the atmospheric pressure was different. It's interesting. Here's come to the theory that I like the best. Again, this is my opinion. It wasn't my theory, it's just what I like. Our body does not really age. For example, cells in our body are constantly being replaced. Our skin is replaced in a month. Our intestines replace themselves every 4 days. Red blood cells entirely replace every 90 days, and white blood cells are replaced every week. The heart and brain, of course, turn over very slowly. It is believed that most of our body renews itself within 10 years. So if our body is no more than 10 years old, why am I like I am? Which, I can't remember anything, I can't see anything. My hearing, especially when Patty's talking, becomes much worse. Why is that? We do have cells in our nerves that from the time we are born till we die, that thousands die every minute. We have lots of nerve cells, but the nerve cells, unlike all these other cells we just reviewed, do not replace themselves. So if we have thousands and thousands of nerve cells dying every minute, how long there's probably some limit. If everybody is born with a similar number of nerve cells, there's probably a limit in how long they can live. At some point, again, the theory of this is that no human being born these days can live to be more than 125 years, because after so many nerve cells die, the body just can't function anymore. It's theorized that if all the major diseases, heart disease, cancer, One more I can't remember. If all of those were found cures for, more people would live to be this maximum amount, but nobody would live longer than the maximum, say, of 125 years. So maybe Adam, when he was created, lost no nerve cells. After the fall, he started to lose some nerve cells. Maybe he lost hundreds a minute instead of thousands. Maybe for the next several generations, next 3 generations after Shem, they started losing more. They got down to 600. And then by the time you get to Adam, they're starting losing more. Maybe now you're getting down to thousands of cells per minute. I don't know. Again, somebody's theory, the theory that I like the best, which kind of explains to me why they all lived to be 900. The flood happened. God changed people's bodies so that more cells died. Can't prove it, but that's the theory. That's what we know about how long people live and why. And I don't know why. I don't pretend to know why, but I do find it interesting. I want to talk briefly about insurance. This ought to be fun. Insurance is a way to spread risk over many people. So many people pay insurance premiums. Few people have losses. And so many pay a little to absorb the losses of a few. Right? So the question is, do we need insurance, and how much insurance do we need? Certainly when it comes to things like owning a home, and I have a mortgage on a home, that lender is going to say, you will buy insurance or I will not give you money for you to borrow so you can buy a home. And if I stop paying my insurance premiums, the bank gets very angry and they send a nice letter to me that says, hey, you got to pay your fire insurance premiums or we're going to foreclose on your loan. And if you can't pay your loan, we'll take your house. So I pay my insurance, right? So I need house insurance for sure. Health insurance, that's a big important one, right? Now for me personally, I like to pay as little premiums as possible. I rarely go to the doctor myself. And so what do I need insurance for? Well, I don't need insurance for something that may cost $1,000 or $2,000. But if I have a problem that costs $10,000 or $100,000, I want insurance for that. So I get the highest deductible I can, so I pay the lowest premiums. So if I have a major problem, I have insurance for that. There's insurance for many other things. We have car insurance. The state requires us to have car insurance in order for us to have a license to drive. How much car insurance you have, that's kind of a little bit up to you. So insurance does 2 things. It provides us for the risk of that big thing that we cannot afford to lose, right? My house, for example, I just can't afford to lose it, so I'm going to buy insurance. It also buys us peace of mind, and that's where a little bit of the differences come in. Myself, I look at it almost purely from a financial position. Now that's my position. I'm an accountant, right? Pretty boring person. I look at numbers and I say, okay, I can take on this risk. I don't want the insurance company to take it. I will take it because I know one thing. I know insurance companies are not benevolent people. They're in it to make money. So if they're in it to make money, they're going to charge enough that they don't lose money. They not only have to pay for the losses, they have to pay for their employees, they got to pay for rent, they got to pay for their supplies, and they got to earn a profit. That's a lot of money coming out. So it's not just money that they take in and give out. They're taking in way more than they're giving out. So I just kind of do the math in my head and say, if I can afford the risk of the loss, I will take the risk because more likely than not, I'm going to benefit financially over the long term. I could lose, but I'm going to take that risk. And financial conditioning, your financial conditioning is going to largely do upon risk. The more risk you take, generally, the more you're going to make. So an entrepreneur, somebody starts their own business, taking on a huge risk, right? They work 24 hours a day, or they work really hard, right? And they just can't really ever leave their job. They're taking on a big risk, but when they take on that big risk, often they get the biggest reward for that. If you want to reduce your risk, be an employee, stay an employee, you work and you get paid. Your risk is reduced minimally. The company you're working for may go out of business, but your risk is significantly reduced. Whereas if I own my own business, my risk is increased. I may get more of a profit, but I may have more of a loss because of that. What about buying, well, let me skip that. Many things can be insured. I go into Amazon right now, and if I buy I don't know, little handheld device, little something I want to attach to something, they get, oh, you want to buy insurance for that? Here's $9. You can buy insurance for almost anything. And I just don't need, I just look at it financially and I say, I don't need it. Like a phone. How many people buy, don't raise your hand, how many people buy insurance for your phone? I used to. And then one time I actually cashed in on it. The amount of premiums I paid plus the deductible I paid was more than just buying a new phone. Why didn't I do the math ahead of time? Well, I'll never do it again. Cancel all that insurance. Now, again, insurance, if I'm just going to be financial, I'm not going to buy it unless it's got a really big risk. That's a pure financial decision. However, on the other hand, it also buys peace of mind. And maybe you're different than me. I hope you are. But some people want the peace of mind. They say, I would rather take, the risk that I'm going to spend more money and I don't have to worry about it because I've got insurance coverage for this. I don't want a $5,000 deductible on medical insurance. I want a $500 deductible because I have peace of mind that way. There's nothing wrong with that. I pay money for some silly things. I pay money for a lot of money to play golf, right? That's what gives me pleasure. That's what I need to do. Maybe what you need to do is something different. You need peace of mind for insurance. However, if you want to just look at it financially, insure as little as possible. Last time we talked briefly about leasing versus buying. Patty says I came down, I crashed really hard, and I didn't really touch on it very much, so I'm going to try to do a little bit better this time. The old saying is it takes money to make money. It's very true. It's hard to make money if you don't have money. Also kind of applies to buying a house. Do I buy a house or do I lease a house or I lease an apartment, whatever it is I do? If I buy a house, what am I taking on? A very big commitment. I got principal, I got interest, I got insurance, I got property taxes, and they call it a money pit for a real reason. House repairs and furnaces go out, air conditioning goes out. Boy, at my house, it's a real money pit. If you want to reduce that risk, what do? You lease. Then the owner has to take on the risk of the insurance for fire and for repairs, those kind of things. You control your expenses and minimize your risk if you lease. If your money situation is tight, in my opinion, one of the worst, I guess my dad taught me this way, he says, Jack, don't ever be house poor. And what he meant by is buying so much house that you can't really afford it, or you can't afford anything else but making that house payment, because then you are teetering on this edge of you're taking some of this risk. What happens if you get big expenses, whatever expenses those could be, non-house related, whatever, and now all of a sudden you can't pay your mortgage, you can't pay your fire insurance, and somebody takes that house because you can't pay for it anymore. You've taken on that risk, and you've lost a lot of money. All the money you put into it is now gone. What are you going to do? So is leasing wrong? No way. Is leasing bad? No way. It's risk limiting. Most businesses who could easily afford properties to buy, what do? They lease because they're not in the business of owning properties and taking on that risk. They're in the properties of doing something. They're in the business of doing something else. They need to focus on something else. Us as individuals, a house, if you can afford it, you're going to be money ahead. Many corporations these days are driving up housing prices. Why? Because they're buying houses and leasing them out to people. I had a couple of clients. That's what they did. They bought very expensive houses and leased them out to people. And were they doing it out of their benevolence? No way. They were doing it to make money. So will you be financially better off by buying versus renting? Most likely, yes. Not absolutely for sure, but most likely you will be better off financially buying as opposed to renting. However, buying takes on risk. Don't take on the risk. Manage your risk by leasing if you don't have the cash flow to handle it. Very important decision whether you lease or buy. But if you are leasing and not buying, that is a good decision if that fits for you. There's nothing wrong with that. If you have any questions, I'd like to take those. But as a quick review, if we started out on this, is financial problems comes from spending, overspending. Control your spending. Either spend way less than you make or budget your expenses so you know how much I got to pay for food, shelter, and clothing, and how much that's got to be. How much do I have left over? Can I buy this car? Can I make this down payment? Should I buy this computer? Should I make this large purchase or not? If you don't really have a somewhat of a handle on what your expenses are compared to your income, you are guessing and you're taking on way more risk than you need, and you could run into trouble. Save money for your future, because someday in the future, maybe you can't work. Maybe you don't want to work, but you have to save money for your future. Whether you save money in just a savings account at a bank and add $50 a week or whatever it is, try to maximize that savings because it grows over time. At some point, say you have little today, at some point you can invest in the U.S. stock market and you're going to be better off. And in my opinion, based on the research I've done and the books I've read, books I've read, the purchase of the S&P 500 index fund is the cheapest thing to buy. Nobody's getting rich off of that. And you're investing in the 500 most profitable, fastest growing companies in the United States of America, and that's managed for you. You don't have to do that. Just invest in that. And the fees are generally around $4 per every 10,000 invested, whereas mutual funds, normally a good way to diversify your investment, is $200 a year plus 20% of the profits that you make goes to the fund manager. So I would not recommend doing that. Do not borrow on credit cards. Now there are times where you just have to, right? But if you can avoid that at all costs, do not borrow on credit cards. It's such an expensive debt. And I audited banks, they are my clients, and what was one of their most profitable divisions? Their credit card portfolio. The loans on people paying interest on credit cards, very expensive. If money is tight, use cash. If I only use cash, I know when it's gone. But if I write checks, do you really know when all your money's gone? You got to pay attention. You got to manage your checkbook. You can do that, but it's a whole lot easier if I just use cash. And if money is tight, be careful. Don't use credit cards unless you do it. They're a nice convenience, but one step removed from being able to control. When I write the check, there's a ledger you can write that in to keep track of each credit card purchase. If money is tight, you got to keep track of it somehow, some way, writing it all down. Who does that? I don't. So be very careful of those. This is it. We're done. Yes, ma'am.
I have 2 questions.
I will try my best.
How to pick a good investment company to work with, and I would like to start a savings account for my boys, but it seems like if I get into certain accounts, I can only put it in, it's a one-time account. I can't keep adding to it. Whereas, and those are like the high yields, but I could go savings account and add into it, but I'm not going to get as much in return from that. So how can I find a good balance of a good return and still be able to add to their account?
So very good question, and not everybody's going to think of this the same. I think of it, one more thing to think of is, can I teach my children how to do things, how to manage things? So if I do a savings account, yeah, I'm not going to get a very good return, but if I can teach them putting money away and showing them a statement that you get in paper every month, how it grows, just by the savings, forget the earnings, but just having the savings and watch it grow, you're teaching them something. And that's worth something that you can't really measure. So if I earn 10% on $50, which is what the U.S. stock market can do if you don't pay a bunch of mutual fund fees, 10% of $50 is $5 a year. Okay, I'm sacrificing maybe $5 a year, or almost $5 a year, by teaching my kids how to manage it. So I would encourage how much feedback can I get to show them how they're saving? But Yeah, there's just no way I would do something that I can't add to, because the importance of saving is being able to add to it consistently. It's very, very important. I think you hit the nail on the head. I would not buy something to get a higher return. I'd also be very careful about higher returns, because a lot of frauds promise a lot of returns. I'm not saying that it is. You got to research it. When it comes to an investment advisor, my personal advice, don't use them. They're just money going to somebody else. Buy the S&P 500 index, and don't look at it. Just like this past week, I lost a lot of money. I don't care, right? Because I don't really need that for another 10, 20 years. I don't say I don't care. I can't tell Patty because she doesn't like it when we lose a lot of money. But it's a long-term thing, right? Not anything to worry about, not anything to be worried about. But some people just want help, and there's nothing wrong with that. Get an investment advisor that somebody has used, ask people around, look for good referrals. Do not ever answer the phone. Somebody saying, hey, I've got something for you. Hang up. You know, I have friends, one of my best friends in the whole wide world was a financial advisor, a stockbroker for Dean Witter. And how does he get into business? Dialing for dollars, he calls it. Just dialing for dollars. I mean, that's how they get into it. But there's so many people out there that are working, they're working for themselves. They want to make as much money as they can. It's called YTB, yield to broker. They maximize the yield to broker. And what does that do to your yield? It reduces yours and increases theirs. So be careful of buying any weird products, annuities, very difficult, probably shouldn't be used. There's a company that, or life insurance products to be an investment. Life insurance to manage the risk, so that when we were younger, if I died, Patty had to pay off a mortgage, and I kept her from, expanding her career because she was raising. I needed life insurance for her. She doesn't like it, but we don't have any life insurance anymore. We don't need it. She'll be rich if I die. So there's no reason for me to have it at my age. But when I was in my 20s and 30s, I needed it, right? I needed life insurance. So I guess be careful of that and get it when you need it. Did I come close to answering it? Okay. Anything else? Good. Father, thank you, Lord, for